Hi, welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White. I'm the founder and CEO of the Bobby White Foundation, and we're here to talk about the hard stuff. But first, I really want to thank my producer, John, is behind the scenes today, and with Area 52 Media Group. They're the reason why we can, bring you some of this content. Actually, all of the content. So I really want to thank Area 52 Media Group for their support, and John and his family for all the years of support, for me, and they're just wonderful. And DeLynn Gaston, one of our supporters with yeah, that's it. The mortgage firm. I don't know, my brain today. So anything mortgages, she's your gal. Seriously, she's the only one that I would trust in doing anything with mortgages. First time buyers, she can help you. Got credit, issues, she can help you get everything all lined up. So when it's time to buy, you can be pre-approved and help things go smoothly. Actually, they redid my mortgage after Bobby died, and it just was so easy and simple, and it's nice to have people that know what they're doing. So, anyways, today we're gonna talk about how chronic illness and depression, and specifically multiple sclerosis, has to do with suicide. I haven't really gone into it, too much, but I have talked about in the past. Bobby had been diagnosed with MS many years ago, and the reason it kind of came up, I got a text from one of my sister-in-laws, and it was a copy of an article or a gal that was kind of talking about what she was going through with her MS, and it dawned on me that we're coming up on about the time Bobby was diagnosed with MS in February of 1991, and back then there was one drug available, and at the time, there was so much going on kind of in our lives at that time. We were still dealing with the death of my first husband, getting hit by a truck while serving on US 27, and Bobby was an eyewitness to that. And this is 3 years later, Bobby was diagnosed with MS. But even prior to the diagnosis, he started having symptoms which we didn't know that that's what it was. Probably about 6 months after Michael's death, and going on 3 years later, Bobby and I were up here in Newport Richey, visiting his parents for Labor Day weekend, and we went back home, and he went out to work and couldn't stand up. His equilibrium was all off, and this sent us on this months journey, which we were actually very, very fortunate, because oftentimes people with chronic illness, autoimmune diseases, it takes sometimes more than months, years to diagnose. And I guess we were really pretty fortunate. His really severe symptoms started coming out in September of 90, and he couldn't work. He couldn't stand up. You don't have any equilibrium. You can't stand in the middle of a highway and survey, or carry a canoe into a swamp. So things were affecting his extremities, his eyesight. We ended up getting an MRI which was like a baseline MRI at the time. And then he also had a spinal tap, and the spinal tap didn't diagnose it. But that following February, the follow-up MRIs with the exacerbations, and what it showed were new lesions on his brain. And so back then, in 91, there was one drug available, and I don't remember the name of it, but we had this awesome neurologist when we were in Fort Lauderdale, and he told us that he could take this drug. Now, mind you, he was still pretty sick. The MS was really active in his body. He couldn't work. He couldn't drive. And so anyway, our neurologist told us, and we weren't married at the time, and I don't know what that has to do with it, but we weren't anyways. So this neurologist told us that there was this drug that he could take, and it was an injection, and he'd have to give this injection into his stomach. I can't remember. It was at least a couple times a week, I believe. At least once a week, but I think it was a couple times a week. And back then, this drug was $1,000 in 1991, and that was just for the drug. That didn't include any of the syringes or any of the extras that you need to give yourself an injection. And he told us that Bobby would get sicker than he already was for the next 3 months, with no guarantee of this drug even working. So we just looked at each other and looked at the neurologist and said, we need to go home and talk about this. So we did. And we decided, besides all that, just that initial part, that wasn't even including whatever the side effects were for this drug. So we went home and we discussed it, and we decided together that we were not going to put him on the drug, that we were going to do things another way. And it was in February 91, and then 2 months later, April 1st, we were moved into our home in Newport Richey. So we decided, we were planning on leaving Fort Lauderdale anyways. It was just too much. With Michael's death, neither one of us wanted to stay there. So we were tossing around the idea of moving to the Tampa Bay area, to Newport Richey, where his family is, or back out west where my family was. And we decided when he was diagnosed with MS that we would move here to Newport Richey. I didn't think it was fair to him that we move all the way across country, not knowing how this progressive disease was how it was going to progress. So anyways, it was a long journey. People with MS, and I pulled up this really good article. It's a peer-reviewed article I'll talk about here in a second. Depression is a really huge thing, as probably with any chronic illness. We're very, I believe, very fortunate with the progression of his disease until 25 years of it, because I've known other people within our family group range, and people that I knew, ironically, who had MS, and I have had noticed that a lot of the differences in how their disease progressed, sort of, and how they were able to handle it, or how they were able to handle it, had an effect on how how the MS progressed. I grew up back home where I grew up. A guy that my dad worked for when I was really young. My dad worked worked in the body shop of a car dealership, which is still there. Actually, his son Garrett runs it. Leonard Evans. Garrett's dad had MS, and I remember most of my growing up, he had MS for a really long time, but he had such a great attitude, and he lived a long time with MS. I remember going home one time, going up to the racetrack. They own the racetrack at home after Bobby's diagnosis, and going up to the announcer's booth just to talk to him about how he had dealt with it through his life, and how he could have he was just an upbeat guy. He just handled things, he was just very positive. And even in the light of having lost one of his sons, I think as a teenager, and so he lived a long life with his MS. And then I knew other family friends who they didn't have such a great home life. They were in the midst of going to get a divorce, and they didn't when he was diagnosed with MS. But he wasn't living with a positive attitude. Things were, I guess, rough, tense, and he ended up dying from complications from MS just within several years. And so I really believe that, and it goes with anything. I mean, even with dealing with the loss of somebody from suicide, I think how we deal with things and try and be as positive and upbeat as we can, instead of falling into the depths of depression, which sometimes that is really hard, because I know I went there a few years ago, and it's still a struggle for me. Not quite as much, and I'm just hoping and praying that all the work that I'm doing to help others and myself keeps that in a positive direction. Multiple sclerosis it's a degenerative disease. I mean, you're not ever going to get better from it. It's just going to continue to get worse. And I think that, like with Bobby's case, I mean, we had a lot. I mean, we had 25 years with him being diagnosed with MS. And I truly believe, and I think, and even my sister-in-laws have said to me that, if we would have put him on any of these other drugs, which a gazillion have come out now since 91, that people are on all these drugs, and the side effects are just mind-blowing to me, that we probably would have lost Bobby a long time ago, a lot sooner than we did, with him not taking the conventional drugs. We had him on for periods of time, doses of vitamins, high quality vitamins, organic vitamins, not the vitamins that you buy at the grocery store. There's a bunch of stuff in all them. And during this time period, my mom found out about, I don't even know, it's not like a vitamin, but it's a supplement called lecithin. And she had noticed that her elderly elderly customers she worked at, was Rite Aid or Payless, and were buying this lecithin. And she asked them, what is this for? And they said it was for the brain, and So she's like, maybe you might want to try this with Bobby. So on top of the really high quality multivitamins, we added in the lecithin. And there was a time period over these 25 years that he was in complete total remission for 7 years. For 7 years, he did not have one exacerbation, not one. And it was funny. I remember standing in the kitchen one night and him and I talking, and he was kind of teasing me about, because I always go for try and go for the organic, the non-traditional ways of healing, in a way. And he would tease me about it. And I remember standing there and telling him, I said, think about it. When was the last time you had an MS attack? And he couldn't remember. And I told him, I said, you have been in remission for 7 years. Of course, that was several years before he died, but that was just like amazing. But again, as he got older, then the exacerbations started back, and the fall before he took his life, he had a really bad one, and it was probably one of the worst that he had since he was first diagnosed. And I know, hindsight, if we could just, put it forward, it would change so much. But he was self-medicating with alcohol, which many people do with chronic illness. My dad, he did the same thing. He had severe back issues from being an auto body man for many years. But medicating with alcohol and depression that goes along with MS, they say that's just what is one of the things that is so difficult with suicide, is that it's not one thing. It's usually a combination of several things, and then finally everything is just piling up, and that's just it. And I want to read this. This from this peer-reviewed article, Multiple Sclerosis and Suicide. It's a peer-reviewed article in the Multiple Sclerosis Journal. Anthony Feinstein and Benis Pavasian. But the opening paragraph is from a book in which we're going to end up getting this from for the library, the Foundation Library. It's a quote from, I think her name is Sally Brampton, Shoot the Damn Dog, a memoir of depression. And this quote is from the book. Killing oneself is, anyway, a misnomer. We don't kill ourselves. We are simply defeated by the long, hard struggle to stay alive. When somebody dies after a long illness, we are apt to say, with a note of approval, he fought so hard. And they are inclined to think about suicide that no fight was involved, that somebody simply gave up. This is quite wrong. And I believe that to be true. Chronic illness is, it's a long, hard fight. And it's not something that just the person diagnosed goes through. Granted, it was way easier for me than it was for Bobby. But I did everything that I thought I could do to help make things easier for him. He would call, because I would use essential oils with a lot of stuff, and a couple times he was complaining his feet hurt really, really bad, and we got him really good arch support stuff for his boots. And so I told him, I'd been reading on some stuff, and I said, I have this essential oil, and I said, I'm going to put it on your feet when you go to bed. And he would call it my voodoo stuff. That's what he calls the different things that I do. So my Udu Voodoo stuff. And so I told him when he went to bed that night, I said, now, if you wake up tomorrow morning and your feet still hurt, I said, it's not going to happen like right away, you know? And he said, okay. So I put the essential oils on his feet, and he woke up the next morning to go to work, and he's like, you know what? My feet don't hurt. And I'm like, really? And he's like, no, they don't work. I mean, they don't hurt. And I'm like, well, that's really cool. And I said, I guess my Udu Voodoo stuff works. So we would put essential oils on his feet, and until they, then his feet were fine for a while. And often, even with his vitamins, like we would go like in doses for a while and then kind of stop for a little bit when things were good, because I didn't want to not have somewhere to go, like we're dosed out. Whether it was the right way to do it, I don't know, but that's what they do with people that take prednisone and some other drugs. But this was all pretty much natural stuff. So anyway, so I just loved the beginning of this paragraph here, and then it goes on. There is no more emotive topic in medicine than suicide. In an age of evidence-based medicine in which outcomes are scrutinized, mulled over, fiercely debated, and disagreed upon, suicide stands apart. And, I've been looking over, some different peer-reviewed articles on suicide and multiple sclerosis, which I'm going to dig into this a little bit further, but it goes with any chronic illness or autoimmune disease, depression. All these things kind of fall under one scope. I even, we'll see if it works out, contacted the National MS Society. So I'm going to talk to somebody about that. But anyways, so I wanted to get that all in. And usually at the beginning of the show, I talk about all of our events that are coming up and stuff, but I switched it around a little bit because reading this article just got me thinking a lot that we really need to share this. And it just goes back to it's just difficult. And suicide is really our suicide rates are high, but guess what? Our suicide rates are also underreported. They are underreported, especially with people with illnesses, depression, unless it can be confirmedly documented that the death was by a suicide. It's not considered a suicide. So something we need to think about. So we have events, of course, we have our support groups coming up. The Spring Hill support group is February 12th at the NAMI office. And then the West Pasco support group is February 20th at the Oasis Coffee Spot. The second Wednesday and the third Thursday. And then we have on February 8th, next Saturday, the inaugural Community Health Fair at, I think it's on 52. Yeah, at Summit Medical on State Road 52. Hopefully we will be having a table there. This will be a great community event, bringing all healthcare providers together. And then, again, I want to talk about, and I've been really, really good about this. I've been reading my Grief One Day at a Time by Dr. Alan Wolfelt every morning. And he is going to be here in Florida, in Palm Harbor on February 25th and 26th. The community seminar is February 25th from 7 to 9 at North Bay Community Church. I will definitely be at that one. And for any caregivers, the caregiver seminar is in, they changed it. It was in Clearwater. They changed it to South St. Pete. If any of you in the area, in the Tampa Bay area, have a chance to go to any of these seminars, go to the what is it? It's the Curlew Hills Memorial Gardens website, Dr. Wolfelt. Well, that's the Life and Center for Loss and Life Transition. The information is there too on on his calendar. But this is where you can get the book, the Grief 3. This book, this one here, very good. Every day. And actually, my quote for today is from this book. But register at Curlew Hills. So, yes, our quote for today is, I will accept my grief as the wild and disorderly experience it is. In acceptance lies peace. There are so many good things in this book, and it he kind of how there's like two quotes. There's a quote from somebody else at the beginning of it, and then he has a quote at the bottom, which that was actually today's quote, and then a meditation in between. And I really find it helpful. And so be sure to go to that website, and you can order that book and all the other stuff that he has. The leading grief expert, I believe, in the United States. So with that, please remember to make sure that you have these phone numbers either memorized or in your phone. Call or text 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifelines. You can also text 741-741. And on both of these, press 1 for veterans. There's also, you can text Jason for the youth. First responders text badges. You just never know when you're going to be the one that will bring hope to somebody's life. Just remember, there is always hope. Thank you.